I had a friend named Molly and a friend named Jack. I introduced them. When they came to visit me, they're from Ontario. They came to visit me about 7 years after they started dating. I hooked them up. And essentially, they were doing a crop tour across America. They were driving to California. And I was really happy to see Jack because I seen Facebook photos of him, and he looked like a skeleton in the hospital a year before. And I really thought he was a goner. We all thought he was a goner. Jack's not his real name. I'm not going to get into the details about his medical issues, but these are real people. And the thing is that when Jack stepped out of the truck, you know, and Molly was coming around, and just as Molly was coming out the porch and I was about to give her a big hug, she was all smiles. You know, I said to Jack, you know, you look really good, man. I said, what's this woman feeding you? You should get married to her. And I hugged Molly, and Jack just said, I like to keep my options open. You could feel this tension go through Molly's body. And all of a sudden, she started crying. And they weren't tears of joy. And do you ever say anything stupid? And like have your wife look at you holding the baby saying, oh man. Like I looked at Bernadette and I was like, oh man, we have to have dinner with these people for the next 3 hours. Then I was thinking, no, they're staying here for the weekend. And then I started thinking, no, they have to drive to California in the same car together. Did anybody ever do anything stupid like that? That was that moment. But the thing is that I went with Molly to the apple orchard and walked with her, and she was just crying her eyes out. And she says, well, basically, for 2 years, they dated, and then she moved in with him, thinking that they'd get engaged within a year. And then he didn't want to get engaged for some reason. And then she made all these sacrifices. She gave up her career so she could look after Jack when he was in the hospital. Not only look after Jack, but keep his business going, right? She made so many different sacrifices. And then when Jack got well, she really expected that he would get a ring on her finger. Now, she was 36 years old. She wanted to have a family with this guy. And, you know, the thing is that she's like, why am I not good enough for this guy? What more can I do for him? You know, she had such anxiety about her future, and her self-esteem was on the floor. How many people here could relate to how Molly would feel in that situation? Anybody here could relate? Raise your hand. You know, that she wants to get a ring on her finger and get on I'm old school. I'm old school. And I believe that at a certain point in time, a man's got to be a man and make a commitment to the relationship. You know, he's got to get a ring on her finger and get some paperwork signed so there's stability in the future and treat her as an equal partner. How many people here would agree with me on that? I want you to think about that for a second, because that's exactly how most Generation X and millennial farmers feel. 77% of family farms do not have a succession plan. 77% of family farms do not have a succession plan. Probably you guys, the word succession on your farms, for 77% of you, is a dirty, dirty word that you don't want to bring up. And, you know, you love John Deere tractors, you love country music, but you love your grandparents. Actually, love's not a strong enough word for a lot of you in your relationship with your grandparents, right? Your Oma and Opa. And you're so confused because you love your parents and you see how your dad and mom have high anxiety about the future, and they have low self-esteem. And your dad works his butt off. He's probably tripled the size of the farm since he started farming there about 30 years ago. And yet, your grandpa won't respect him as an equal partner. You know, you must feel confused about that. I seen things from Molly's perspective 16 years ago when I started doing farm succession. And the thing is that when we wrote the book, Farm Succession Shouldn't Be Done in the Funeral Home, put it on Amazon, never thought about that. Suddenly got calls from all over North America. It's a crappy book. It's my 7th book is actually called Stubborn. You guys are going home with a copy of this. But the thing is that, the thing is that I started getting calls from all over North America when there's 2-3 mediators already out at the farm, and they couldn't get a succession deal done. I was a guy from Canada that had been there and done that to help farmers figure out. And the thing is that over the years, I've learned to understand things from Jack's perspective, or your grandparents' perspective. The thing is, Jack and I sat on the back porch, and he says, I love Molly to bits. I don't see why we need to get paperwork signed. He says, I think things are just fine now. And then I got into it a little bit more. He says, you know, divorce rate's 50% or higher. And Molly, she's stubborn. She's stubborn. I don't know how this is going to all work out. She says, I love her to bits. I want to spend the rest of my life with her. But I own the house. I own the business. I own my truck. If I get married, all that is on the line. Why would I stick my neck out? Right? And that is exactly how your grandparents feel. They love your parents. You know, Jack said during the first couple of years, it was the honeymoon years. And probably your grandparents would say the same thing. When your parents were farming with your grandparents in their 20s, it was just like being on a honeymoon. But then little pet peeves started to brew up. And then Molly, for instance, she started pushing for this ring. And then when she didn't get what she wanted, it brought out the ugly side to her. And these little issues started to become bigger issues that Jack became more conscious and more aware of. It's the same thing with farming with your parents. Your parents started in the 30s, probably expected a succession plan to be done. And then the 40s and 50s, they really expected. And over the years, they've grown a lot of anger and resentment. And there's a lack of trust. There's a lack of trust. You know, and this is a situation we have on a lot of family farms. And Jack did not, he said, as long as I don't sign the paperwork, I'm wearing the pants in this family. If I do sign some paperwork, I lose complete control. That's the situation we're dealing with. The thing about marriage, 100 years ago, the husband ran the marriage with an iron fist. Wives be subservient. And then what happened? Women got the vote, and they wanted to be treated like equals. Because nobody wants to be treated like a slave. Nobody wants to be treated like a slave. And yet, we have 50% divorce rate. We say that women got equality in their marriages. We're still struggling with these control issues. We're still having a fight between genders as to who's wearing the pants in the family. And there's always somebody that's a bully. And it's the same thing with farming partnerships. It's the same thing. We have in marriages, we have a lot of emotional and verbal abuse. In farming and with family, we have a lot behind the barn. I mean, everybody might pretend to the neighbors that everything's perfect. But you know as well as I do that there's a lot of verbal and emotional abuse that goes on. And sometimes it gets physical. This issue of control is killing us, both in our marriages and the farming partnerships. And, you know, a lot of folks say that the simple answer is to get a ring on the finger. A lot of folks say that the simple answer is to get paperwork signed. But I have done that as a succession plan. I've convinced some grandfathers to sign over the farm to their sons. But because they spent that decade before butting heads and pulling the farm in different directions, within 2 years after, those farmers are not allowed in the shops that they built. That is a dark secret about succession planning. 23% of family farms, they do have a succession plan. There's a lot of grandfathers that die with their slippers on instead of their work boots because they get pushed off the farm, because they give up that control. So every accountant and lawyer will tell you the secret answer is to simply sign. And I say, before you sign, there's one simple answer that has to be dealt with first. And it is as simple as one line. You know what that one line is? Instead of focusing on failure, instead of having a lack of trust, we got to get everybody within the family focused on success. What is success? Not just for myself, but the whole family. What are we all working towards? You guys take Greek here at college? Anybody here a Bible scholar? ION, what does that stand for? ION is a Greek word for change, action, reaction, transition, right? We got to get really good at change. And that's not by identifying problems and blaming problems on your partners. And the way we do things is always having somebody to blame. We got to get really good at problem solving together as a team and get everybody hyper-focused on success. That's how you have a successful succession, right? Does that make sense? And the thing is that, we got to, when it comes down to it, we as farmers and as people, we always try to bully. When we're trying to make decisions, we're always trying to be bullies, right? I have an idea. You might listen to what your partner's saying, but usually you're just listening so you can provide the counter argument, right? We got to get really good at empathizing with what our partner's saying, respecting what they have to say, and understanding what they're having to say. And then you got to get, instead of saying, this is my way or the highway, like my dad and my grandpa, my mom and me all did, you got to get really good at exploring options and brainstorming options, respecting what your partners have to say. Instead of trying to always be right and win in an argument, we got to focus on the right decision being made. And that sometimes means that you're going to be wrong. But if you focus on always being right, things ain't going to be right. The second thing is, we got to stop being narcissistic. Does anybody know what narcissism means? It means self-centered. And we've got to be more empathetic. And part of that is identifying that you might be part of the problem. See, when I farmed with my dad always said this. He always said, stop pointing fingers and look at the three fingers pointing back at you. You know what I said? And walked away. My dad was right. He was right about a lot of things. Maybe the farm wasn't as profitable as it should have been, but he did a lot of things right in order for it to be there. And I just didn't have the respect for him. And I was narcissistic, and I was stubborn just as my dad and my mom were. And I didn't see it. Molly, she was accusing Jack of being narcissistic and stubborn. She was equally at fault. And in that apple orchard, she told me a lot of things that were all wrong with Jack. She went on for a half hour. I said, well, Molly, what's one thing that you're doing wrong? Do you think she came up with an answer? She was stubborn. She was completely blameless. I sat in a barn beam about to hang myself because I thought I was completely blameless too. And what I had to do, it took me about 3 minutes to get it out of Molly as to one thing that we're not completely self-aware of ourselves. Like, nobody's perfect. Everybody's got 5% about themselves that they do wrong, right? And if they change that 5%, they'd unlock 50% of their potential. How many people believe that? How many people believe that if if everybody changed 5% about the character, took your weaknesses into strengths, that you would actually unlock 50% of your potential for most people, right? You can think about that for your partners, for your parents and your siblings. It's harder to think for you, right? But that's what Molly had to do. I said, it took me 5 minutes. Finally, she said, well, I'm not always on time with things, okay? And then she made a whole bunch of excuses for why. And she had a lot on her plate. She had a lot on her plate. She was trying to juggle a lot of balls. But the thing is, she wasn't very good at prioritizing. Everything was a priority of 10. I said, Molly, you got to put, maybe one thing that you could change about yourself is that you got to put 80% effort into 20% of the things that matter. You got to get better at investing your time like it's money. And for her to admit that she was going to prioritize, that was a game changer. The thing is that for all of you guys, I want you guys to look at the back. I mean, how many people are here going home to the farm in the next 10 years? Okay, everybody always says, what would you change? You know, when my suggestion isn't to look at the 5 Tupperware containers of ideas that you have on your farm. My suggestion to you is to change how you deal with change. And that's not by you telling your grandpa or your dad what they're doing wrong. It starts with you changing yourself. Everybody go to the back page of this book. The very back page. Now, Willem, what is one bad habit that you have?
I show up late to things.
Everybody does that, right? But the thing is that, right, that's a common thing for a lot of family farms. And, you know, it's kind of cute when you go home and when you're in high school. But the thing is, I sat down, we did a succession deal with a father, and he walked out of the meeting. He says, there's no way in hell that I can sign a $2 million deal to build a hog barn if my son is constantly late for chores. How the hell can I do that? You know, everybody makes mistakes like that. There's no problem with that, Mel. But Willem, when you go home, I want you to give this book to your grandpa so he can understand, or your dad, and you just simply say, okay, I want to take you out for lunch after spring plant. You're going home to spring plant this year?
Yep.
Okay, when are you going to be done spring planting?
April, or not April, May, June.
Okay, so why don't you just say, June 1st, I'm going to take you to Phil's Diner, okay, and you give this to your dad and your grandpa, and you just say, okay, this is my bad habit, I'm always late. What's a better habit?
Being punctual.
Being 10 minutes early, right? Showing that being the first one there, last one to leave. Showing that you care, right? That's the fix. First one there, last one to leave, right? And then you say, okay, what does it say here in this book? Speak loudly. Yeah, right there.
Pledge to become stubborn in a positive way over the next 30 days to make this new habit stick. One condition, read the book Stubborn. If you do, I'll take you and our other partners out for lunch in a month to discuss its concepts and its lunch date. I'm serious about catalyzing change by first changing myself. If my partners don't see this habit stick, then I'll tip our server $100.
So that's putting your money where his mouth is, right? But the thing is, if you actually go out and do this, suddenly your partners will see a light at the end of the tunnel and know it's not a train. And if you constantly do this for the next 2 years, the thing is, Molly was still not perfect 2 years, a year into the relationship. But what I did with Molly and Jack was we made one change a month. I met with them over Zoom, just the same as I meet with my farm clients. I met with them. They made one improvement a month. And by Christmas, Jack dropped to his knee and proposed to Molly. Now, Molly was still not perfect, but Jack knew that he could work with this person. She was going to be the partner and friend he could live with for the rest of his life. He seen a light at the end of the tunnel and knew it was not a train. And for several of you, you won't admit to this in front of the class, but behind the barn between your dad and your grandpa, there's a lot of tension, probably. And instead of you going home and fixing them, you can set the example. For 6 months, what you say in this meeting is you say, okay, what's the next thing I can do to change? You get a performance review. Every month, just take your family out for breakfast. And the thing is, you do that over 6 months, maybe your dad might start making one change a month too. And what I would suggest you guys do is each partner makes one change to their character and becoming the partner and friend anybody want to work with. And then more importantly, you make one change in how you work together. For Molly and Jack, it was simply they were ships passing in the night. They had busy schedules. Sometimes they had conflicts in their schedule, and they found out last minute. All I got them to do was Sunday night, they had a beer together on the front porch. They just planned out their weeks, right? That was a game changer for them. Simple concepts, and we do the same thing with a lot of family farms, sitting down on Monday mornings, planning what's the schedule for, what's the priorities for this week? Who's doing what on what day? Looking at the weather report, you can be 80% accurate, right? Instead of being pissed off, looking over your partners on Thursday afternoon and saying, why is he cutting the lawn when there's bills to pay, right? So if you make one improvement, let's just say there's 2 partners. That's 24 changes in the course of the year. If you make one improvement when how you guys work together, that's 36 changes in the course of the year, just for 2 partners. Your partnership would be 360 degrees different. You know what I mean? And the thing is that if you do this, then you'll become the partner and friend that your grandpa won't fear being pushed off the farm. Your grandpa won't fear, I mean, you'll still have pet peeves, but he knows that over time, you don't see farming as a challenge of working with people. You see it as a challenge to become a better man or a better woman. And that's what you got to do. The same thing for your marriages. Who here is getting married in the next year? You're getting married? Are you having an open bar? Okay, so is it a closed bar or is it a cash bar? Okay, you probably put more thought into that, and you probably put more thought into what the flower arrangement, well, actually you didn't do the flower arrangement. But the thing is that you guys probably thought about the superficial stuff. I mean, there's nothing more prideful than a marriage, right? We all get our suits on. We all look our best. And it's pride that kills marriages. We got to enter our marriages and our relationships with our family with a sense of humility. A sense of humility. And the thing is that narcissism is the ultimate sense of pride. Narcissism is like, I'm the best, right? Everybody else is less than me, right? I'm in control. And when you stand up, the truth is about marriage, when you think about this, when you stand up before God, family, and friends, you're saying to everybody, I am no longer, my priorities are second to this person's, right? My pride is secondary to the needs of this person. I'm always going to put this person's needs first. You're going to be the opposite of narcissism. And yet, we forget these vows. We get all caught up in the pomp and ceremony. We lose perspective on things. And probably 6 months or 6 years later, you're narcissistic. It's the narcissistic tendencies that causes families to get divorced. You think about that. And the way to actually keep it all together, and farm partnerships. We have 50% divorce rate in family marriages. We have probably about over 50% divorce rates when it comes to family farms. I mean, when I went to agriculture college, a lot of guys wanting to go home and farm. Half of those guys are not farming with their parents. They might make excuses that they got a better job off a farm, but that's not the truth. They just couldn't work with family. And it was all because everybody's narcissistic. And I've read 47 books on narcissism. And if you actually go online, and check out narcissism, all the psychologists will say the only solution is to divorce somebody. That just does not seem acceptable to me. Because I've lived divorce. I know what it's like not to get together with your Christmas. That is not what family is all about. And I studied this a long time. I've been to a lot of weddings. 1 Corinthians 13, does anybody know what that is? Does anybody know what 1 Corinthians 13? It's said at every wedding ceremony. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not self-seeking. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not delight in evil, but rejoices in truth. Always hopes, always prayers, always perseveres. Love never fails. And the simple thing is, if you go home to your family farm and you enter the relationship, as well as you enter your marriage, with a sense of humility, and you put family always first. And instead of being stubborn with everybody, you're stubborn on yourself, become the partner and friend anybody wants to work with. You can create heaven on earth. Thanks very much. Really appreciate it.